everybody, and welcome to this private investor event featuring SafeToNet. We will be recording this meeting for those who join late or those who can't make it today. And we'll be also happy to send you guys the link to the recording so you can share it with any colleagues or potential co-investors. Today, we have an amazing world-leading company with an excellent investment opportunity. And before I introduce management, I want to introduce our co-host, Skylar. And if you have any questions or need anything, please private message her or me. So let me give you a quick rundown of today's meeting. The company will give an overview for about 20-25 minutes, after which we will have about 40 minutes for Q&A, and we obviously want to respect your time, so we'll finish within the hour. And if you need more time with management, obviously, you can work with them directly to schedule follow-on meetings. And we're also going to do a quick informal and confidential poll about halfway through the question and answer period to gauge your interest and so that we can prioritize our follow-ups. Regarding questions and the Q&A, please feel free to post questions right into the chat box anytime something pops into your mind, and Sky will be moderating the Q&A once Richard finishes his presentation. And you can also feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you so you can ask your questions live if you wish. A little bit about the company. SafeToNet is a world leader in tackling a global social problem, one that we read about every day and one that worries every parent who has ever given their child a smartphone or a tablet. The problem is online abuse, including bullying, aggression, and sextortion. Over 750 million children are online at any time, and they are all at risk. Smartphones, wearables, social networks, messaging apps, chat rooms, they're not built with content safety in mind, and the internet is unregulated, ungoverned, and a home for predators and abusers. SafeToNet is the answer. SafeToNet is a market-leading, award-winning cyber safety company using AI to detect and filter in real time harmful content as the child is using their device. And it balances privacy with safety by running locally on a smartphone, tablet, wearable, or IoT device. Company is a B2B SaaS platform. It sells its software to handset and device manufacturers, telecommunications companies, and ed tech companies. They have corporate partnerships in place with brands such as Samsung, Digicel, and Orange, and they're already working in 130 countries. In the United States, the company is #1 and operates under the NetNanny brand. The product is fully endorsed by the British government as well as the German government, where they are also leaders in those marketplaces. The company has already raised over $37 million since inception. They're currently raising a $16 million A+ round in advance of a planned $70 million Series B round in Q2 of next year. The Series B is expected to be valued at twice the company's current valuation. Company has increased market cap 4x over the last 3 years. And this A round is almost completely subscribed, as one institutional investor has already committed almost 14 million out of the 16 million. This same institutional investor has committed 35 million for the follow-on Series B. A couple of quick key investment considerations, then I'll turn it over to the CEO. But obviously, the company operates in a huge market, has a clear pathway to an IPO within 2 to 3 years. Revenues have grown 8x in the last 12 months. The company has multiple near-term valuation inflection points. It expects to achieve a valuation north of 450 million in 2022, having generated a weighted pipeline with over $60 million of visible revenue over the next 24 months. The leadership team is world-class. The founders and key executives are all proven, highly experienced business people with an outstanding track record in starting and selling tech companies. The CEO and the CFO have worked together at different companies for over 20 years and have highly relevant experience, impressive fundraising, and exit deal-making experience. The technology is developed primarily in the USA, and it's led by an industry-leading CTO based in Philadelphia. The company has been also approached multiple times to sell, with the last offer at 1.35x current valuation. And that just came in a few months ago from a very well-known US publicly listed tech company. The cap table is full of mostly private investors. They are all high profile from around the world. There are some very large names of people in the world of commerce, finance, sports, and leisure. The investment opportunity is highly attractive. Preferred minimum investment is 150,000 US, and it is a limited and highly likely to be oversubscribed within the next 2 weeks. So with that, let me thank you guys again for joining us. And I'd like to turn things over to the company's CEO, Richard Pursey, who will introduce his team and give you a company overview. Richard, congratulations on all of your progress to date and welcome.
Thank you, Tien, and thank you for that brilliant introduction. I'm not really sure I need to say anything now. So any questions? It's the quickest presentation ever. So thank you, Tien and Skylar, for putting on this event today. We're really appreciative of it. I'm going to introduce you just briefly to the members of my team who are on the call, and they can wave at you. So there are two Brits from the team. There's me and Ted Haley. Ted is our CFO. He's the guy that adds up and takes away too often for my liking. And then we have Frank Fox, who's our CEO of Americas, based in Philly. And then we have Joey Thompson, our CTO, also based in Philly. And if you don't like the presentation I'm going to give, just ask to see Joey's CV, because it's got words on it that I can't even pronounce, let alone understand. And Joey was part of the Net Nanny team that we brought on board and joined forces with SafeToNet through a merger stroke acquisition earlier this year, January, February, something like that. Anyway, nice to meet you all. Thank you, Tien, again. You know why we're here. We only exist, SafeToNet only exists to keep children safe online. That's the absolute single driving force of our entire company. And it's really interesting because it makes it relatively easy to make decisions in our business, because every decision we take begins with the question, well, look, if you take that decision, will it make children safer online or not? And if it does, then we'll take that decision. If it doesn't, then we probably won't. So a byproduct, of course, of safeguarding children brilliantly is wealth creation for our shareholders. And so we're one of those companies where you get a wonderful blend of profit and purpose. So it's absolutely all about protecting children from bullying, abuse, aggression, sextortion, all that nasty, nasty, nasty stuff, which we read about pretty much every day. And for those of you on this session who are a mum or a dad or an aunt or an uncle or maybe a grandfather or a grandmother, you know about this problem. And the challenge, of course, for all parents around the world, and it doesn't matter where you come from, is that you have that fearful moment where sooner or later you have to give your child a smartphone. And the moment you've done that, you've sort of lost them, because you don't know what they're saying, you don't know who they're talking to, you don't know what they're seeing, and you don't know what they're hearing. And so SafeToNet exists to try and find that balance, that perfect balance that we search for all the time, which is the balance between keeping children safe whilst also protecting their rights for privacy. And that's a sort of a tricky landscape at times to operate in. So the background of our company was that we started it, Ted and I, founders of it, we started it back in 2013. I have to tell you, sometimes that feels like that was 100 years ago. 2013, my background is that I've started and sold 4 technology companies. Ted and I, as Tien said, we've worked together for some 20 odd years. He hasn't been able to get rid of me yet. He tries very hard, but he hasn't been able to get rid of me yet. And so my background was very much in the early days in the City of London. And I was working in technology, running a trading floor for a leading merchant bank. It was a Forex trading floor. And I was given this fantastic budget to try and rebuild the entire floor from both an aesthetics as well as a technology perspective. And at the time, this was Big Bang in the City of London, circa 1987, something like that. And there was no money to put the traders, there was no room to put the traders anywhere. So I had to sort of squash them up to one end of the room, curtain off the room, and do up the bit that I'd emptied, and then move them over once I'd done it. And I learned that the way that my personality works is that raging self-interest becomes quite a motivator. And I was worried that I might ask a contractor to snip the wrong cable at the wrong time, and then the floor would basically go down and we'd lose a ton of money. And so I looked for a disaster recovery floor for trading rooms, and there wasn't one. And so my claim to fame is that I built the world's first disaster recovery room for trading floors. Nobody's ever told me I'm wrong. Maybe some of you on this call are about to tell me that. Now, there's a reason why this is all relevant, because I ended up starting a disaster recovery company, and the key to this was that I would buy an asset which I would need to deliver to a customer in a disaster, and this is an asset they wouldn't want to hold themselves, like a trading floor. And my challenge was that what if more than one customer asked for that same trading floor at the same time? And so what I did is I wrote a piece of software that was all linked to behavioral analytics. And that is key to what SafeToNet does. It's all about behavioral analytics. And so I would try and determine the likelihood of a customer of mine calling upon this service. And so it was almost like psychometric testing of business. And it was very successful. And so I did very well with that company, sold it, actually bought it back, sold it again, and so on. So fast forward now to 2013, when Ted and I started SafeToNet, is that what happened was we were become private investors, and we were asked to invest in a social network, significant social network, based out of the UK, but very much international, in fact, global now. And we really liked what we saw. Now, look at me. I'm older than Moses, as you can all tell. I didn't know anything about social networks at the time. So we started doing our due diligence. And sure enough, what did we see? We saw all this harm. We saw all this horrific content. But we rather liked this social network. But foolishly, or perhaps naively, what we thought was we'd give them all the money that they wanted at actually a better price than they were asking. But our idea was that we could de-risk their business, because we were worried that it would suffer reputation risk if there was some sort of problem. Maybe some children were hurt online and so on. So we offered all the money and they said no. And we couldn't understand. Why would you say no? You know, we offered everything at a decent price and everything else. And but they said no. It was really bizarre, and I'll never forget it. We were sort of driving away from the meeting, couldn't really understand why we'd been rejected. But the more we thought about it, sort of my brain started to sort of accept the rejection and think, well, actually, I didn't want to invest in it anyway. But actually, the more we thought about it, the penny eventually dropped, and we realized that they didn't want our money because they didn't want us to clean up the network. And that is the same problem that you'll be familiar with the likes of Facebook and Twitter and others around the world, whose commercial interests simply don't align with keeping children safe online. Now that, for me, is an injustice, and that's fundamentally one of the reasons why we started this business. But also, I'm a dad of 4. I thought I was a cool dad, and I would give my kids the latest and greatest, shiniest and most powerful iPhone, not realizing, of course, what content they were seeing. I'd talk to them, and then they would tell me about it, and so on. A few other things happened at the same time that led us to start this company. And we looked around at the marketplace, and we couldn't see any technology that was focused on the content. So it's what children are seeing and what they're doing, not necessarily how long they're doing it for. And we always sort of beg the sort of rhetorical question, what do we think is worse? The boy that spends 8 hours a day shooting up people on Call of Duty, or the girl that spends 1 minute talking to somebody who isn't who they say they are? So it's about contextualizing what the child is doing in the moment and in real time. And you'll hear me talk about real time over the next few minutes, because that is the key to safeguarding. Technology has to guide and advise and steer children away from risk in the moment as they're using their device. There's no point deploying technology that tells you that yesterday your son sent a naked picture of himself. It is too late at that point. It's too late. It's gone, it's out there, and the damage is done. So we focused very hard on, well, what could we possibly do in a world where we knew that the Facebooks and the Snaps of this world didn't want technology like ours? They would come out with great platitudes saying, well, yeah, they would like it, but actually they don't really deploy it. And I think the recent Frances Haugen Facebook leaks tells us quite a lot about that, but that won't, I'm sure, have come as a surprise to any of us on this call. But as we looked at the landscape, we just knew that it was all about content. But the power of a mobile phone back in 2013, 2014, it wasn't strong enough. It didn't have the oomph, if you like, to be able to deploy algorithms without those algorithms burning the battery of the device. I.e., the technology, especially in the field of AI, didn't really exist. But also, one of the key challenges in the world of AI, and I'm sure you all know this on this call, is that your AI algorithms are only as good as the data that you have to train them. And where do you get the data from in the first place, of online interactions between children? That data is really, really difficult to get. If you were to get that data, typically what you're going to get is what are classed as legal harms such as bullying, abuse, and aggression. What you don't get is illegal harms such as child sexual abuse material. CSAM is held by law enforcement and governments around the world. And you just cannot get hold of that data to be able to train your algorithms. So we decided from the outset that we'd have two strands to our business. First, we build hopefully brilliant technology that worked in real time, that analyzed what a child was doing as they were using their device and steer them away from risk in the moment. And then the other one was to really get to understand the psychology behind the way children interact online, why they interact. We get to understand why predators did what they did and their patterns of behavior and so on. And so what we wanted to do was to build a brand of real credibility so that we could get a seat at the table of the legislators, of the policymakers, of the regulators and so on. And we feel pretty proud of what we've done so far. As Tien said, we're now endorsed by the UK government, the German government as well. We connected with and working with Interpol, Europol, Homeland Security, International Justice Mission, and so on. And that's crucial if you're going to really understand the complexities of safeguarding children online. So that was our two strands, really get to understand the whole issue of online harms and safeguarding children, and also the applications they use, the language they use, and so on. And then the second one was to build these algorithms. Key to us was that from the early days we engaged with children, we wanted to see this problem through the eyes of the young. And so we created a youth advisory board. Now, as you can tell, listening to me and looking at me, I'm a crusty old relic. So I'm the old CEO. We have a young CEO, and she was 14 when she first took on the job. And she has now led forums and discussion groups with over 2,000 children since this company was first formed. And they've given us fantastic insights into the landscape of safeguarding. The crucial one being, children want to be safe online. They just don't want mum and dad to snoop or spy or pry on them. So that's the background to everything. So what we did in the early days is, how do you get the data? We actually built our own social network. It was like a video version of Twitter, where we'd all interact with short video clips, which would seamlessly join together to make a film of your conversation. It was pretty successful. We had celebrities on it and so on. And we built some sort of rudimentary agricultural algorithms to sort of weed out bad people on it. Eventually, it was called something else. Eventually, we sort of established ourselves, managed to amass decent data so that we could really enter this market. But again, to be able to be successful, you need volume of customers, volume of data, and you need it with velocity. You need it quickly if you're going to train your algorithms effectively enough. So we knew early on that we needed to be in the B to B to C space. That was our sort of entry point. And so we wanted to sell to telcos, handset manufacturers, and so on. And why? Because obviously they've got the volume of children that we need to be able to achieve our mission. So we started going wherever the telcos were. We entered competitions to get brand awareness. And back in 2016, our business started to catch fire because we won a fantastic nationwide competition with BT and EE here in the UK, the UK's #1 telco. And we gained lots of recognition, loads of plaudits, and ultimately we signed a contract with them to save the children that use their systems and so on. And essentially, what we eventually did, we were able to launch, based upon all of this learnings, based upon all the data, we were able to launch what we regard as the world's first intelligent safeguarding keyboard. Now, every one of you has a phone, and if you pick up your phone and start messaging on it, it's that keyboard that we've been able to adapt. So we replace the native keyboard on your iOS or your Android device, and we start to then analyze what children are doing in real time. Now, this goes back to my time in the city and behavioral analytics and behavioral patterning. And if you could just imagine now, as you type away on your keyboard, but more importantly, how a child types away on the keyboard, you can start to pick up a ton of inputs before you've even looked at the words that they're using. So you can do what we call anomaly detection. You can tell that the child is typing faster now than they were an hour ago. You can tell that they're using fewer characters now than they were an hour ago. Maybe autocorrect has gone into overdrive and so on. And these things start to tell you that there's been a change in emotion. And emotion detection is a core part of our technology. So we can detect 9 different states of negative emotions: fear, anxiety, low self-esteem, sadness, those sorts of things. And they're crucial to the way that we've taught our AI. So the AI has a ton of different inputs now. So pressure with which you type the keyboard, speed with which you type it, number of characters, autocorrect, time of day, age of child, and so on. And you start to get some fascinating outputs from all of these inputs before you've even got into natural language processing, which of course we've got that too. And so the statistic I love to quote is that when you amass data like this and you start recognizing patterns, we can tell you that if your son shows signs of fear at 8:20 on a Sunday evening, we know there's a 73% chance he's being bullied at school. We know that if any of us on this call contribute to a YouTube thread and you write between 3 and 8 words, we know there's a 70% chance you've said something hurtful or hateful. So you get the idea, and we've amassed thousands of these patterns, and we believe we're singularly the leading company in the world where it relates to safeguarding children through the keyboard. Of course, that's text-based analysis, but also we analyze imagery and video, and I'll come on to that in a second. So back to the keyboard, what this keyboard does, based upon the Youth Advisory Board and these 2,000 plus youngsters that taught us how to do what we're doing, is the keyboard, as the child gets close to risk, maybe they're typing something harmful or there's something hurtful going on, the keyboard changes color and it starts to guide them in real time, just to pause and reflect, just to slow down, just to be careful. And it has an amazing effect because it also frustrates the child because it won't let them send something harmful. But it's filtering in real time, and it's the real time element, I'm going to keep repeating it, that is crucial. So much so that the proudest moment, certainly in my life, and I know Ted's and the others in our team, was last year as a 14-year-old girl in California with our software on her device. She was messaging a friend saying she'd had enough and she was feeling low and she wanted to die. Our software alerted mum and dad. That's what it's designed to do if there's something serious. They went to her room and she'd already cut herself in multiple places. She was rushed to hospital and thankfully she's now in recovery physically and mentally. And her mum and dad have said to us that if the software hadn't been there, well, you could imagine what would have happened. So when we talk about our company, we talk about the impact it has. We don't talk about 4x or 10x revenue growth or anything like that. We talk about KidX. It's all about how many children can we safeguard this year, how many next year, how many the year after that, and how impactful is our software on their lives. Can we just affect, just if we can move the dial just by 1 degree, can we affect positive social change? And we think we can. And the reason is, of course, because we're all living in a social experiment where it comes to the online world and social media and social networking. None of us know how we're going to get out of it. And none of us know the genuine impact that this is having on the young. But if you just consider the fact that 7-year-olds have access to hardcore pornography, I mean, what do we think that that's doing to their brains and the future relationships that they're going to have? So real time, in the moment safeguarding, selling our technology through telcos and handset manufacturers, IoT device manufacturers, because our vision is that, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we're going to say sort of 3 years, maybe 4 years, every one of us on this call is going to scratch our heads and think back quizzically and remember that, it was 2021, that guy going on and boring us all on that call in November 2021. Do you remember that time? At that time, children could pick up a phone and could see a man having his head cut off. They could see hardcore pornography. They could be bullied. They could be abused. They themselves could talk to anybody they wanted to anywhere around the world without any level of safety. And when you buy a phone, a smartphone for your child, that smartphone, the moment they switch it on, there is no safety technology embedded on it. And so our vision is that one day, using technology like ours, and of course we want it to be ours, and that's our mission, it's the Intel Inside style model, is that when any child uses any device connecting to the internet where content is relevant, that device will automatically have safeguarding software on it. Some of you may be as old as me on this call, and you'll remember buying cars without seatbelts. And when you think about it now, what? Cars without seatbelts? That seatbelts now come as standard. ABS come as standard. Airbags come as standard. They didn't used to. They were optional extras. In the future, safeguarding children online will not be an optional extra. It will just happen by default. And then we have other fantastic technology, including a live video stream filter. Just let that sink in. We're on Zoom. If somebody bombed this call now and started showing pornography, for example, our technology would detect it in milliseconds and filter it live in the moment. That's crucial. That means children can't download and stream harmful content, but also, most crucially, they can't produce it. And one of the biggest issues, especially since the pandemic and lockdown, is that children spend more time online, alone in their rooms, and they're tempted into sexting and so on. And that is just an awful problem. The person that receives the images forwards it to somebody else, even though they promise that they don't. That leads to cyber shaming, that leads to depression, and ultimately can lead to suicide. And in the UK alone, 5 children a week take their own lives. This is such a serious, serious problem. And we're so driven and determined to square up to it. So that's the sort of technology. Obviously, there's tons more, and Joey on the call can tell you a lot more about how sophisticated our tech is. As I said, we're a B2B. We're on a rocket ship. We're growing incredibly quickly. And we only started commercializing our software in 2020. In the first year, we did about £4.5 million in sales. Sorry, I can't do the dollar conversion in my head. Ted can, I can't. And then this year we're on track to do something like 14 to 15 million pounds. I mean, fantastic growth in sales and more. Next year we're expecting and already can see that we're going to do in the region of 25 to 26. Year after that it'll be 45, something like that. You can see it's a very steep growth. But moreover, it's the impact that we're having. By this time next year, we want to be safeguarding over 3 million children. By 2023, we want that to be 9 million and more. We are acquisitive. That wasn't our initial plan, but because we're on a rocket ship and because we've seen how awful this problem, we are absolutely on a world domination program. And we're very innovative in the approach we've taken. In Germany, which is our strongest market, the German government, by the way, spent over 3 million euros advertising SafeToNet on roadside billboards. In Germany, we own our own mobile phone stores. We own about 80 of them, something like that. Why do we do that? Because some telcos are too slow to react. So they're called SafeToNet family stores. When you walk into our family stores, to buy a smartphone or a tablet for your child, you cannot walk out with that device not having technology on it. I could talk tons and tons and tons more about our business, as I'm sure you can tell. I'm conscious of the time. I was given about 25 minutes. I've probably already taken 35. Sorry about that, Tien. I'm sure there's tons I've missed. We acquired Net Nanny, based out in Philly. Earlier this year, absolute brilliant company with the world leading AI tech for filtering harmful websites in real time in the moment. So very fast company. We're raising this money now because we want to safeguard millions and millions and more children, and we'd love to have you on board. That's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Great. Thanks, Richard. I just wanted to let you know we've got a couple questions in the chat box. I have gotten some emails from some potential investors, so I put them in. Skylar is going to moderate the Q&A. You guys can feel free to type your questions into the chat box or raise hand and we will call on you. Also, as a reminder, in about 10 or 15 minutes, we'll put up a poll for a couple seconds just to see how interested you are while we continue the Q&A. So I'll turn it over to Skylar now.
Great, thanks, Tien. Okay, yeah, so I'll moderate the questions. So our first question says, one investor wants to know about the current investor base / cap table. Who are the larger investors in the 37 million raised to date?
Okay, Ted, I'll take that one, but please join in if I've missed anything. So we predominantly raised our money from family offices, high net worth and ultra high net worth investors around the world, some of whom are extremely sophisticated. They've made many, many investments. And we have in the UK, for example, the UK's largest property owner. In Europe, we have Europe's largest angel investor. He's made something like 350 investments. We have investors from around the world. We have family offices from the United States, Switzerland, Germany, quite a few from the UK. Many of our investors have invested 3, maybe even 4 times. We have directors from some of the world's largest banks, largest investment houses. We have 2 individuals who own Premier League football clubs. So you can see we've got quite an array of investors.
Okay. Next question says, can you talk more about the institution which has committed to lead the A round and the B round? Who are they? Are they a growth stage VC?
Ted, do you want to answer that one?
Well, there's certainly not a VC growth or anything else. Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd sort of phrase them as a collection of European family offices. I think a small consortium. and I think we'll call it that, with very light conditions as part of their investment. I think that summarizes it, Richard.
Yes, it's a collection of 8 family offices. They're very focused on ESG and social impact investing. They are predominantly based in Germany and Switzerland, but one of the family offices is in the US.
Okay, great. I'll pause because Rob Colorina has a question. I think he's going to unmute himself and ask. Rob, are you there?
I am just putting my earpiece back on. Thank you. Thanks, Skylar and Tien. My question, Richard, or whoever you designate, I thought it was interesting in your introduction. You're in Europe, you have a couple folks in the Pennsylvania area, and we've got investments in both continents and on a few boards there. 2 things. Where is your target customer going to be based? Is it U.S. or is it Europe based, or and then sort of why the bifurcation between in terms of operations there between Philadelphia and it sounds like you're in the UK.
Thank you, Rob. So our number 1 target market is the US. I can't remember the percentages now, but the majority of our personnel are based in the US. They're in Philadelphia. I'm excluding those people that work in the stores in Germany. But we're tackling a global social problem. And when you tackle a global social problem using AI in the way that we tackle it, you have to understand the different sort of cultural behavioral patterns of one nationality to another, one sort of ethnic group to another, and so on. And what we found is that you cannot effectively safeguard children just by being British, just for argument's sake. You need to have that broad understanding so that your algorithms can detect all of these different sort of cultural patterns and so on. But ultimately, we are on a world domination campaign, and the United Nations will say 750 million children online at any given moment in time. We'd have mission fail if all we did was this safeguard in one country. We have to have a great understanding of different languages and so on around the world. But the US is by far the number 1 target market for us. And that is not least because there is a stronger adoption of what's called parental control software in the States than pretty much anywhere around the world. I see in the question set this Renzo is asking how we differ from Custodio. Custodio is one of those parental controls companies. Parental controls is really all about controlling your child's device, limiting screen time, maybe blocking an app, maybe even blocking the phone. They don't focus on the content, with the exception of websites. And that sort of technology has been around for quite some time, but not to the level of net nannies. And if you want to know how brilliant the net nanny AI is at filtering websites, then Joey can answer. But the US is quite advanced, and I would say the most advanced in the whole industry. Does that answer your question, Rob?
Rob, to give you a more view of where we are. So one of the main reasons we acquired NetNanny was because of the focus in the U.S. And we eliminated a few engineering and product jobs in the UK because they have such a talented team. We have customer support in Utah. We have other developers in Canada. So it's just not Philadelphia, but we have over the last 6 months been moving the emphasis of our work to the U.S., anticipating that this is where the major growth will be.
Okay, thank you. That's good. I'll yield. I may have a follow-up in a little bit later, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. I will let Kevin. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I just did. So question for you, I guess. Richard, can you talk a little bit about your go-to-market strategy and how you're acquiring all these customers? Is there kind of a sense to the madness of how you basically go ahead and build this up into where you want to go?
Thanks. Sense to the madness. Oh, no. Let's try and position this. There is no point us trying to build technology that works specifically for Facebook or specifically for a chat room technology or a messaging app. We feel that the technology best works as close to the operating system as you can possibly get, and so that it becomes application agnostic. So that naturally lends ourselves to writing technology that others can embed in their own tech stack. So we're focusing very much on the handset manufacturers, the smartwatch manufacturers, the IoT manufacturers, and so on. And so it's always a slow burn, we know, when you're selling to a telco. We know it is. However, we've now been building up a pipeline that has started to pop. We're landing these companies, and we've learned in particular that the more of the sort of better known telcos that you land, the more the others follow. So we now have contracts with telcos in the Middle East. Ooredoo, for example, 221 million customers operating in 16 countries, might be 20 countries. Digicel in the Caribbean, the Caribbean, I think you call it. 16 countries there that they sell to. Here in Europe, we've got contracts with Deutsche Telekom, huge organization. Of course, they own T-Mobile or part of T-Mobile in the States. So very much our strategy is to build our brand, make sure we can talk with authority about the problem, and then engage at a higher level as we possibly can within each of these telcos. And we establish the credibility of our brand by building the relationships that we've got with governments around the world. I, for example, sit on the United Nations board using AI to tackle child sexual abuse. We have those sorts of relationships. They themselves open the doors to all of the connections that we've managed to amass over time.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on this. So are you saying that, I understand where you're going with regards to your go-to-market strategy. Are you signing up these folks and doing a rev share? Are you licensing your technology to them? How are you making your money when you talk about these big players?
Yeah, so it's a bit horses for courses, Kevin. For the telcos, it's classically a revenue share. Okay. With the handset manufacturers, it isn't. It's like a gold license agreement. So, for example, in Germany, we have Gigaset, one of our customers. They embed our technology at source on the phone, so that phone is safe out of the box. We don't have a per license deal there. They just bought a gold license. You can imagine how that works. So a sum of money. So it does tend to change depending on who it is.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
May I down a little bit on the building up of our subscribers? So in the United States, there are three cohorts, we're under an NDA with one of the largest telecoms in the world. You can take three guesses who it might be. What we're doing there, they have a vendor in their family app that is subscribed by millions, that they're so enthralled with our technology. What we're going to do initially is to do SDKs, and Joey can comment on this, that layer in our top feature sets. Right now we're talking about 3 or 4. That would add millions immediately. The other thing we're doing is there are about 50 to 60 US EDU companies that offer soft schools. We would be doing the same there. They are very anxious to add in some of our features to protect their students. And then the third is, one of the upside to buying Net Nanny, they had and have a very strong B2C, which, we're not doing away with. But that's cash flow today. That's been very, terrific to have. So we're really a B company, but there is a B2C component, which is the 25-year-old Net Nanny brand. But those are the what we're focused on each day to grow our constituents in our customer base.
I got it. Just one last question. Probably I don't want to dominate the conference, but what is the cost to acquire a customer? Do you have some kind of idea, acquiring and then keeping them?
So that question tends to, and forgive me for using this sort of terminology, tends to assume that we're an app-based business. We don't measure our business on customer acquisition cost or MAU or DAU style thing. We're very much focused on selling very large scale contracts, ideally multi-million-dollar contracts with each business. So we don't measure it in the way that I think you're looking for. We've got CAC figures for the Net Nanny B2C subscribers, which I don't have those off the top of my head, but we can certainly provide those to you. But for us, the cost of sale is wooing the handset manufacturer, the device manufacturer, the telco, the messaging app, and so on, for us, however long that might take to close them.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put up a poll while we continue the Q&A, just for you guys to answer, so you can read that. But we will continue Q&A while that's up. So the next question is regarding growth and how much of the 8 times in revenue growth is from handset partnerships and how much is from telco partnerships. Can you break down your $60 million pipeline? Is that mostly from telcos? How much of that is in the USA?
Okay, so I'm going to have to take sort of a stab at these figures because I'm not going to be, I don't have the spreadsheet, the weighted pipeline spreadsheet in front of me to give you exact. But I would say in the US, my hunch would be 25% of our pipeline will be coming from the US or is in the US. We are establishing a C-suite in Brazil to tackle Latin America, and we already have 3 substantial prospects in Latin America. 2, one of which is a cybersecurity company, one of which is a telco, and one of which is like an IT distributor. Overall, again, I'm just giving you a knee-jerk response, but on our weighted pipeline, we have in excess of 30 telcos. But I would weight the majority of the income would be from the telcos. I'd say about 65% of the weighted pipeline will be telcos. And then the rest will be handset manufacturers, cybersecurity companies, and edtech companies. But certainly the telcos give us the broader reach and an established marketplace to go after. Have I answered all of the questions there, Skylar? There was more than...
Yeah, I think so. That's good. So the next question is, can current BOD members be disclosed as well? To reserve the BOD seats, what would be the anticipated investment criteria, such as investment size, strategic versus institutional investor?
I'm sorry, I don't know what a BOD member is.
I think it's board of directors.
Ah.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay, got it. Yes, so me, in Europe we have, so we're structured so that Ted and I, Ted, our CFO on the call, we work at sort of a group level. So we oversee the entire business, working on strategic opportunities, these sorts of events. And then we have Frank, who CEO of Americas, who you've listened to today. We have a CEO in EMEA called Gottfried Werner. He's based out of Cologne in Germany. And then we have, Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 non-exec directors, one of whom in the UK, very well known in the field of marketing and publicity. He was a quasi-celebrity of his own right, but he's a very, very successful businessman. When we acquired NetNanny, we were delighted to welcome to our board Mike Burns. Mike was one of the board directors of NetNanny. Joey Thompson, our CTO, he sits at our board meetings as an observer, I think. And then we have another non-exec director, a gentleman again who's built a business from pretty much nothing up to $1 billion company. He now actually spends his time working on SafeToNet, but also representing a family office of one of the wealthiest families in the world. Ted, have I missed anybody there? I probably have. Shame on me if I have.
No, I think that's it. Richard, got them all.
Okay, great. John Keeley is asking, can your software be detected or turned off by the user?
I love that question, John. So depending on how you interact with our software, the answer is yes sometimes and no in others. Where it's embedded deeply in the operating system, then no, it cannot be removed. Where it is an app, then it can be, but as soon as that happens, and this is where there's various different scenarios of our software, but in, for example, the NetNanny version, and Joey, you might want to add a little bit more here, talk about the technology here, because I'm probably going to get this wrong. But essentially, if the child were to try and delete it, it will alert the parent.
Okay.
Joey, would you add anything to that?
That's correct. And I would also say, yes, the child knows the software is on the device. I mean, NetNanny, I would say if you look at the NetNanny acquisition, NetNanny focused more on younger children, and SafeToNet focused more on children that are interacting in social media because of the smart keyboard. But in either case, we're not hiding the fact the child knows that there's somebody, some software paying attention in the background trying to keep them safe.
Okay. Rob Colorina, did you want to unmute and ask another question?
Yes, thanks. Question. In education is very, very important. And you just saw in this election this past week in Virginia how that became either the path to victory or the path to loss. What's your strategy? Because it would seem that this would be a competitive advantage for a school system to have this, or even a preschool. They would have this as a greater badge of merit that would, that would increase tuition, enrollment, that type of thing. Am I seeing that right, or are you guys taking paths towards that operation?
May I
You are
answer
seeing that
Richard?
right, but I'm going to hand over to Frank. Frank, do you want to give a quick 30 seconds on your background and then answer Rob's question?
So Rob, that was one of the buckets I was referring to in the beat. And as I mentioned, there are about 50 solid EDU firms out there representing school and districts. And you are spot on. It is a huge, huge market. And because there are so many players in it, they are looking for differentiator. Nobody has some of the SDKs that we have. So the early conversations that we're having, and they're weekly, have been terrific with school districts, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we're not going to reinvent the wheel as a full Monty application. We're offering these singular feature sets to, as you said, Rob, make them stand out, create, and give more of a 360 product versus what they're offering today. So it is neck and neck with the B2B telecom market because that's where all the kids are. They're in schools. So it's a huge market, Rob.
And Frank, your background?
So Rob, I am a pure business guy, but I woke up one morning as president of a private high school in Philadelphia. And I did that for 8 years. It was a real gift. And what I did during those 8 years was I moved around the country, learning all about EDU practices, trying to bring it back to my institution, fundraising, et cetera. And so that has really, it's one of the main reasons hired by Richard, because he saw, where, how important the EDU market would be to our company. So I've been out of there for a couple of years now, but it has really served me well in walking through doors with our product.
Thank you, guys. Good.
Great. The next question is, do we get a deck with revenue numbers?
Ted?
Yeah, they could certainly put in revenue numbers, no problem. And follow up with Skylar and Chien afterwards on that.
We do have on this call our appointed investment bankers, Clecia and Co, have been absolutely brilliant supporting us for our Series B. Michael is on the call. Michael, if you want to say hello and just wave. I know you have in front of you a spreadsheet with about 5,000 pages in it that pivots all over the place and does amazingly wonderful things if you press a button with it. I'm not saying that entire spreadsheet would be available, but certainly we can give you any answers to any of those sorts of questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Richard. We can share any and all information regarding model, financial fundamentals, business plan, that sort of stuff. Post the call. There should be revenue numbers also in the deck we shared previously to this call also.
Okay, awesome. Kevin, do you have another question?
I do. Quick question with regards to your revenue that you're generating today and probably moving forward. Do you break it down into like buckets, like, the 80-20 rule? Who are the largest providers for your revenue versus some of the other smaller companies that maybe, or smaller opportunities that may be growing later on?
Ted?
We haven't, Kevin, and we don't tend to. But the spreadsheet that Michael's referring to may break that down a little bit more. Whether we want to share that or not, but we might want to have a discussion on perhaps. Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we're particularly concentrated on one particular bucket.
No, we don't, Kevin, we don't have, and I know what you mean about the 80-20. We don't have one of those. If things go to plan with one particular prospect, then that prospect will certainly contribute a significant amount to 2022's revenue, but still not at that 80-20 style split. And the revenue is not only spread fairly evenly across our customers, those customers are themselves spread fairly evenly around the world.
Yeah, I understand. I think that the biggest issue about that, and the reason behind the question was trying to get a feeling of how focused you are in terms of, generating revenue. one of the problems that you end up having is a lot of startups, especially when they have a product that looks like a Swiss knife, they go after, pretty much anything and everything that moves. However, you don't really end up in one or two markets that you absolutely dominate, and then take that and leverage that to the next one, right? So, as an investor, always making sure that people are focused on where the biggest bang for the buck, generate that revenue, and then pivot to the next one.
Yeah. So, as you can tell, looking at us as a leadership team, we're somewhat wizened. We've been around the block a bit. We don't tend to chase any deal that comes our way. We analyze the opportunity for, first off, the impact it's going to have on the children that we can access as a result of connecting to them. But we've sort of worked, and I guess over the years, learned the art of focusing on a sufficient quantum of pipeline opportunities so that you're not dependent on one and then suddenly find you get horribly caught out if that one doesn't come in. But across our pipeline, I would say, not including edu, which is a slightly different kettle of fish, but I would say we're focused right now, our sales teams are focused right now on about 70 or 80 opportunities. You don't interact with them every day of the week, obviously, but each one of those opportunities is in itself a significant opportunity. And of course, many of our customers are brands that we've all heard of. They're multinational brands, and that in itself provides confidence to the next prospect that we're selling to. But yeah, we have a laser line focus on who we want to sell to. We've set ourselves targets, quantum of top 10 telcos around the world, for example, and we're engaged with 6 of those at the moment, top 50 particular countries. We learned earlier on, this is a discussion, to be honest, that everybody is prepared to have. Everybody gets the problem, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do anything about it. We've resisted selling into places like China, even though we could do. We're focused on very much a few core territories.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I know we're towards the end of the meeting. Does anyone have any last minute questions they could unmute themselves and ask? Feel free.
Yeah, I have one last quick one, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Richard, thanks for taking the questions. Richard, do you worry that somebody could develop an app to get around your software?
I don't get an app to get around our software. I don't think I do, John, to be honest. When I look at the barriers to entry to our market, you can't just wake up tomorrow morning and think, do you know what, I'll have a go at this. I'll see if I can build one of these sorts of technology stacks. And that's because it takes a while to get to know what it is that you've got to build in the first place. And that's understanding the cyber psychology issues, the cyber criminology issues, the different cultural behavioral patterns around the world, understanding how children speak to each other online, which most of us on this call, quite frankly, would never understand. They speak in their own tribal speak and so on. You have to amass the data, and the more data that you amass and the speed with which you amass it, the more accurate your algorithms become. And when we look at the future, and undoubtedly competitors will start snapping away at our heels, we know that. We're constantly aware of that. We're constantly alert to it. We have a really good radar system that tells us if anybody has entered the market. I, for example, co-founded here in the UK a group called the Online Safety Tech Industry Association, called OSTIA. It's heavily supported by the government and now actually supported by other governments. It's getting prominence in the US now. And as part of the working group on OSTIA, I get to see any company that becomes a member of it or wants to become a member of it. And it's growing incredibly quickly because the safety tech industry is booming right now. And at the moment, we see interesting companies appear, but we don't see anybody that's got the sophistication in the deep learning and sort of neural networks that we've built over the time. but could somebody build software to get around it? I think that's a really interesting question. I just can't see how they get anywhere if they did. Our software is super intelligent. But that, of course, isn't to say that they wouldn't, especially where it relates to tackling illegal harms. Charles?
Yeah, because what I was thinking is if kids didn't want the software on their phone, they didn't want to be tracked by mom and dad. And so they were looking for a way to disable it in effect. Could somebody develop an app that gave them another keyboard so that they could get around it? So I was thinking, you could even see a situation where kids might get picked on or bullied if they're the ones who have the phones that have your software and other kids don't have it. And so they feel like, they can belittle them for that reason. And somebody develops an app, allows them to enable another keyboard. I don't know if that's all possible.
Absolutely. So I get that. So there's multiple ways to answer that question, and I'll try and be brief because I'm conscious of the time. But you're absolutely right. There is a stigma risk of the child that has this and the child that doesn't. And that's another reason why we sell directly to the manufacturers, so that these devices are safe out of the box. So some of the manufacturers that we're talking to are extremely well-known brands. We have a contract, for example, with Samsung, the world's largest. And so if we get this right, and we're pretty convinced that we're on the track to get it right, then these devices will just be safe by default. So that stigma goes away. The other part of tackling the stigma is making sure you reach the child at the right age in the first place. Selling to a parent of a 14-year-old is nigh on impossible, because that 14-year-old has already had 3, 4, 5 years of unfettered access, talking to who they like, when they like, how they like. And so they're immediately going to be suspicious of tech like ours. And then the other point that I would make is that if our keyboard is removed, then our technology knows it's been removed, because of course it's lost a big part of the inputs that it's using to amass the data to determine the probability of risk. So we would know straight away, and therefore the parent would know straight away. We have a feature which I haven't discussed in any detail, but it's called Safety Indicator. So if you imagine the dashboard of your car, you're driving down the highway, and a yellow light comes up and it tells you that your engine is overheating. You pull over to the hard shoulder, you lift the hood, I think you call it. You lift the hood, we call it the bonnet. You lift the hood to see what's going on. All you know is your engine's overheating, but you don't know why. Well, that's a good analogy of the way our tech works with mum and dad. It tells them there's risk, and then it guides them on how to discover and understand and then deal with that risk, because parents have a nasty habit of piling in and making matters worse. So our software also, though, alerts the child and guides the child without telling the parent there's an issue. So, for example, we have mental well-being features. So we'll offer breathing exercises if we can tell, as we do, that the child may be being bullied. We ask them to just sort of calm down and relax, take a breathing exercise, and then there's audio practices on how to deal with bullying and so on. Now, these features have been designed by those children that I was talking about in the Youth Advisory Board. Now, that doesn't mean some of them don't want it, because certain parents around the world, helicopter parents, they'll force it on their kids and so on. But essentially, we've analysed this inside out, back to front. Yeah, kids are very clever. They'll set up a YouTube account and tell others on how to avoid it. But mum and dad would know the moment that happened.
Helpful, Richard. Thank you.
Hey, Skylar.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a last statement from the U.S.
Definitely. Yeah.
From our beloved Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
As a company, we believe our timing could not be better. As an investor, you should feel the same way. Know what's going down with the pressure on Facebook, on Apple. I speak to high levels of homeland security aid available to me through a guy named Tom Farrell, and Richard can speak to Tom's experience in the UK, but he has quite a presence in law enforcement in the US. One thing we haven't discussed on this call is legislation. It is coming. and it's going to be a great assistance. And SafeToNet can be, we're not going to solve this problem by ourselves. We look to be a solution, probably one of many, but our timing could not be better. And I'm out in the market all over the country, and this is wanted, it's needed, and it's crucial. Thanks, Skylar.
You make a really good point there, Frank. Just to add, just briefly, so the UK government has introduced the online safety bill that will be enacted, we think, in about 2 or 3 years' time. But the wind of change is already being felt by those that fall within the scope of it. That is the social networks, the messaging apps, the thousands of chat rooms that none of us on this call have ever even heard of. They fall within the scope of that. You'll know that the UK currently holds the G7 presidency, and it hands that over to Germany later on this month, I think it is. We're part of a package that is being handed to the German government on best of breed, best in class, how to tackle online harms. And of course, we're very, very strong in Germany as well. The US government is now picked this up. The European government with the Facebook Act has picked this up. You'll know that senators and congressmen have been talking about this non-stop. Come on, and everybody's picking on Facebook. It should be noted that Facebook do actually do quite a lot to safeguard children, but they don't do as much as they possibly could because it's not in their interest. But as Frank said, legislation is absolutely coming, and so we are slap bang in the right place at the right time, and especially because we have a seat at the table. The UK Secretary of State for what's called digital culture, media and sport, the department that owns the online safety bill, Oliver Dowden, the Secretary of State, announced that bill from our London offices. That will give you an idea of how well established we are and how well connected and how influential our business is on the world stage where it relates to tackling online harm.
Great. Thanks so much. I think we're about out of time, but thank you everyone for joining. If you have any last minute questions, feel free to stay on. Otherwise, we can end this meeting. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. And we'll follow up with introductions to management as well as a link to this phone call so that you can share it or review it again if you'd like. And any other additional questions, just let us know, and we're happy to get you any backup information. Rob, did you have a final question? I saw you raise your hand. Are you good?
No, I clapped. That was a clap for you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, everyone.